Appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right. All right. Welcome everyone to our third Brown Bag Quarterly with AAQEP. Just so that we are all on the same page with this, if you would please mute your phones or your computers so that we don't have the background noise, it'd be greatly appreciated. Other than that, we're just moving right along with this new world that we're all living in. So welcome to Engaging Diversity in Educator Preparation. I'm Linda McKee. I'm the Chief Operations Officer, and I'm going to be your host today to move us through a little bit about engaging the diversity. And just so that we're prepared for our next section of this, I'm going to give you some agenda items here. We'll do some introductions, specifically introductions of our member voices that are helping us today. I'll do a little bit of framing the topic, very brief, and then I'm going to turn this over to two of our members who are joining us, and we'll open it up to some discussion at the end. So, introductions, we have with us today Dana Kennamer, who is the Associate Dean of Abilene Christian University. And also talking and presenting for us today would be Catherine Snyder, the Department Chair for Clarkson University. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, I'm Linda McKee. I'm AAQEP's Chief Operations Officer, and I'm going to take us through a little bit of framing that topic. So, engaging diversity. It's a rather important topic for AAQEP. It is a part of our Standard 4 specifically. You can see the conceptual framework here on the slide, and I'm pretty certain the majority of you are already familiar with this conceptual framework. So you're looking at Standard 1 and Standard 3 across the top, foundational expectations that are pretty common to accreditation. Then you're looking at Standards 4 and Standard 2 that are contextual challenges. But if you go down those columns, the completer performance side of it would be Standard 1 and Standard 2. And then the program practice, Standard 3 and Standard 4. So we're going to focus a little bit today on what's happening with Standard 4 and what two of our institutions, two of our members are doing to really approach these topics in particular with Standard 4 at their institutions. So focusing down on Standard 4B, as all of you I'm sure remember, every one of the standards has 6 aspects. So Standard 4B would be the second aspect of Standard 4. And it seeks to meet state and local educator workforce needs and to diversify participation in the educator workforce through candidate recruitment and support. Now, it's not only this standard and this aspect where that's being addressed, but it's also in our Appendix A. When you stop and think about the parts of the appendix that are looking at the recruitment on into selection, admission, through monitoring, talking about the completion of the programs, and then following the completer into the workforce itself. So how do we diversify the participation in that workforce is the question for today. And I'm happy to have with us today two of our members. The first one who will be speaking will be Dana Kennamer with Abilene Christian University. So Dana, I'm going to ask you to take on and just let me know when we need to move these slides for you.
Ooh, I just made it. I was on another Zoom, and when I closed that one, my internet decided to go wonky. And so just as you introduced me, I was able to get back on the network. We know what it's like right now to do that. As she said, I am at Abilene Christian University. We're small, relatively small, university in the middle of Central West Texas. And so the diversity of our population, while it is increasing, is limited. And like many institutions, I think pretty broadly, we struggle with, number one, getting faculty that represent the diversity of even the students that we do have. And we also have some challenges in recruiting and retaining a diverse student body, particularly if you're looking at racial diversity, ethnic diversity. So let's go on to the next slide. Our process, like many processes, this semester was a bit interrupted. We're living in a state of disruption and things moving forward. And then we had to change gears and focus on how do I help these undergrads move into an online environment, and how do I support my faculty in changing their courses midstream. And so I'll tell you the story of where we are right now, and it is a process. The challenges, as I said, it include both recruiting and retaining students. We've had a significant, for our size of the university, increase in the diversity of our student body, but in our teacher ed program, that same diversity is not reflected. Of course, if you look at the research and the data, the overlap between kids who are first gen and kids who come from minority populations is pretty strong. And often they don't want to go into teaching. If I'm going to spend all that money to be the first one to go to college, why would I do something that's not going to pay better? I've read that in lots of places. So we're fighting lots of issues, but we began to feel some pretty strong sense of urgency about this, just missionally, philosophically, as well as looking at the context where we are, where our community where we serve has growing diversity in the school system, and we want our students to be prepared to meet the needs of those kids, but we also want to be part of helping to train and support teachers who reflect the diversity of the classrooms where they serve. So let's go on to the next slide. This is just a story. This is when students tell us the truth. You know, we have often thought, well, we would love to, but, and it's real easy to get stuck in the but, and not say, well, we would love to do that. We can't do that. We can do this, and to really kind of reframe the question and think what is possible within our limitations. Our seniors, the semester before they go into clinical teaching, do a showcase and present their portfolio to an audience of faculty, of students who are coming behind them. And we often ask them questions at the end of their presentation. And one student I think it was last year ago in the fall. So when she was asked, and she's one of our Black students about to go into clinical teaching, she was asked, what do we need to do better? And her answer, go to the next page, was oh, do one more, sorry for getting my slides, because we asked how we can better support candidates, and then now her answer was, you don't really want to know. And the faculty member who asked her said, yeah, I do. I do really want to know. And she is such an exceptional young woman and was quite brave. And this was her answer. In all the courses I've taken in this department, I've never been taught by someone who looks like me. And that was, like I say, it was at the showcase presentation. She was very, very brave. Now she was able to be brave because she trusted us, and the faculty member who asked that question had built a relationship of trust. She knew she could say it and that it would be received. But it was kind of a gut punch, because our first inclination again was to say, well, you know, but we don't have the money to hire faculty and all that stuff. But that really moved us into okay, so fine, we don't have the money to hire faculty of color. Right now, we don't have open positions. We've struggled with that. So what can we do? And so we moved forward with some very intentional kinds of plans and practices. Let's keep going. Oh, one more. This is hard when you can't see your PowerPoint. Created like 3 days ago. So one thing we did was we thought that internally, and this has been a university-wide initiative as well. Recently, the university appointed our first chief diversity officer, not in student life, but an academic leader who is the representative of the academic side and serves on the senior leadership team to really look at university-wide, what do we need to do for diversity. So our conversation internally was taking place in a broader conversation at the institutional level. And so we did a lot of reading. We did a lot of studying. We tried some stuff. We failed. We changed. We were honest about it. But one of the things we did was, despite the fact that we don't have faculty of color in our department, we do on the campus, but right now we don't have any faculty of color in our program, was do a Teachers of Color Forum. That was our first start. It was meaningful. We limited that to our teacher candidates of color. We wanted it to be a safe space. There's difference between safe and brave space, but we started with those students and invited some of our alumni in the area who were classroom teachers to come and be with those students and talk about their experience as a teacher of color in a predominantly white field, but not in a predominantly white classroom. Those students, our teacher candidates, said, no, we really want you to invite everybody next time. And so we implemented another one this last December, where we invited all teacher candidates to come and had a double the number. And it was a powerful experience, and had plans to do more this semester, and COVID. We used our state advisory committee to really dig deep. We were wanting to be honest with ourselves. So we brought back 2 alumni, both who were minority students in our program, both first gen, and asked them to be honest, to tell us the truth. What was it like for you as a student here? One was able to complete our program successfully, and one was not. She and I have stayed in contact quite a bit. She's just finished her master's, I may cry, and is now going into the classroom. She kept going, but she was unable to complete while she was with us, and she was very brave and came back and told us the truth about what we were missing. And we thought that voice was really, really important. We did the reading of the data, we looked at the numbers, but we needed to ask some students who had lived with us to be brutally honest. And they were. And so that resulted then in a pretty significant curriculum analysis. We've done some major faculty development. We brought in Cornelius Minor to work with us as a faculty, also as part of our Summer Institute, where we bring our alumni back, but the faculty participated in that. And have done some significant analysis of the curriculum that exists, some alignment, made some plans, realized that while we don't have a full-time faculty member, we have an adjunct that we've hired, who's one of our alumni in the area, who we hope we can get again, but COVID interrupts and budgets. We don't know what that's going to look like in the fall, right? We hope that we can get her on a grow your own kind of track, because that's one of the ways I think that as we move forward, that's going to be important. And we've had grow your own sort of strategies at the university in the past. Again, we're Central West Texas. So you bring in, and I'll go with specific examples. You bring in a Black female PhD who doesn't know this community and is coming into a conservative Church of Christ affiliated university. It is a significant culture shock to them. And so when we have used the grow your own process of recruiting people to come in, it hasn't worked. And so what we're looking at is, how do we do a grow your own with the ones who know the context, with people who have lived here, who know how to navigate this context and be comfortable, who know the university context and have a much greater opportunity to be successful. And so that is what we're hoping. We'll see what happens with budget, because there was some conversation about budget for grow your own programs, and we are in a state of uncertainty where that particular question lies. So let's go to the next slide. This tells a little bit about our framework, and the PowerPoint includes a list of some of the readings that helped us identify, okay, we can't take, there are two things happening. One, we want our students who who are our minority students to be given voice, to see that this conversation is happening in meaningful ways. We want to teach in ways in our own courses that are culturally responsive. We want to train them to teach in culturally responsive ways. And we also want our students, who are the students, not our minority students, to also explore their identity and think about their own biases and reframe the way that they see themselves in the world. And so we looked at it developmentally, that in our sophomore courses, they got to start with who are they, you know. Our white students often don't know they have a culture. I know that's not unusual. And so the questions that we're really trying to explore there is who am I? As they get into junior courses, we want to focus more on systems, looking at how systems are created, how they're sustained, how they impact people, what is the role of the individual within those systems. Those systems exist, and we didn't create them, but we participate in them in a variety of ways. And so what is our role as a teacher as we encounter those systems? And then in the senior year, we want them to look at how are they going to be agents of change? What is their role going to be? How are they going to be advocates? How are they going to, what does Cornelius Minor say? How are they going to be accomplices? He says they need to move from advocacy to accomplice, which I think is quite interesting. Then we continue to analyze our curriculum. I think that's on the next slide. Keep going. Those are some of the sources we used. We do this quite a bit. We're a small university, so except for a couple of adjuncts, all of our courses are taught by full-time faculty. We're a faculty of 11. So we can all get in the room together, and we often do peer review of syllabi in focused kinds of ways. And so really dig into each other's syllabi, do critique, ask questions about the assessments, all that kind of stuff. And so we went through a peer review of syllabi, looking specifically at, number one, what is the content of culturally responsive teaching, of that training our students for and in diversity. Where's the content? But then also, are we modeling the kinds of instructional strategies that would fit a culturally responsive framework? And so we analyzed the courses first, looking at content, and then also looking at instruction and assessment strategies. We have identified some potential common readings that will go in key courses in the sequence that align with those questions. Who am I? Looking at systems, and now what is my role as I move forward as an advocate? And we were looking at identifying an assessment process to look at, okay, from the sophomore through the senior year, is this doing anything or not? And how can we measure that? And what's a meaningful way to assess that? And that got interrupted. So that's sort of the story of where we are with some of the big pieces. And that's pretty quick, but I'm open for questions, I think.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And what I'm going to ask is that if you have some questions, if we can drop those into the chat box, after we hear from Catherine with Clarkson University, then we will open the discussion so that you can direct your questions to either Dana or Catherine. So, so thank you very much, Dana. I appreciate that. It's a great overview. And moving from Abilene Christian University, we now have Clarkson University, Catherine Snyder. So Catherine, would you like to speak about what you're doing at Clarkson University? Are you with us, Catherine?
Hi, there we go.
There you go.
I'm Catherine. I'm the chair of the education department at Clarkson University. And I really like the pairing of the two presentations. Dana's presentation came at the question from a very different angle. So hopefully you'll find both of the presentations useful. We can go to the next slide. So I titled this Preparing Future Ready Teachers Through Partnerships. The focus of what I'm going to share with you really is on how we've developed partnerships to increase the number of diverse teacher candidates we have in our program. And I'll just read this statement. We're committed to promoting teaching as a vital and valued profession, advancing scholarship, and preparing future-ready teachers who inspire all learners. That's from our vision statement for our department and our programs. And we have that vision statement at the top of just about every document. So that really helps us to keep focused when we're making big decisions. Okay, next slide. So just to give you a little bit of context, the Department of Education is small. We graduate just under 50 students a year. We're masters only, and we have a heavy focus on certifying teachers in secondary disciplines. And then about 25% of our graduates are certifying in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. At any given time, we have about 100 students, and our claim to fame that might not persist this year is 100% job placement going back several years. So that might not happen this year. Of course, we're part of AAQEP, and the program is 30 years old and is very fundamentally grounded in a full year residency. So all of our candidates participate in a full year residency in one school with one mentor. And if you look at the map, we are a satellite campus of Clarkson University. Clarkson's what we call Clarkson Prime. Clarkson Prime is up in Potsdam, and that's the undergrad campus with a few thousand undergrad students and some PhD students. And then following that gold star down the Hudson River, you see we have a research institute at Saranac Lake in the Adirondacks. And continuing down, you come to our location in Schenectady, New York. That's the Capital Region campus. So that's where the education program's housed. And then we also have satellites in Beacon and New York City. So next slide. I'd like to give you a little bit of context for the city that we live in. The city school district of Schenectady is our primary partner in our education programs. And they have a real dichotomy when you look at the makeup of the students versus the teachers. So if you look at that first chart, you see that student diversity, about 50% of the district is Black and Hispanic in terms of the student population. And then if you look at the second diagram, you'll see that more than 90% of the teachers are white. And this is not an unusual diagram. This is what our field is facing, that the teaching force is predominantly white. So as Dana mentioned with her undergraduate student, that she had never had a teacher that looked like her. Yeah, our P12 students don't have teachers that look like them either. And so this is one of the things that we have started to focus on in our program, is really how do we recruit minority candidates into the profession. And Schenectady is our home, and it's the district where if we can start solving the problem here at home, then maybe we can create something that's replicable. Okay, next slide. So a few years ago when we started tackling this, we thought about what are the barriers to entry. And what we started to find in our research and our conversations is that successful candidates from historically underrepresented backgrounds, first of all, they have a lot of choices. Remember, we're a graduate-only program, and so we're recruiting from multiple feeder schools when we recruit our students. And if you have a candidate who's from a historically underrepresented background, who's a senior in college and has done very well, they have a lot of choices. And we don't have as much scholarship money as, say, a dentistry school or a law school or some of those other professions might be able to offer these candidates. So we have a lot of competition when it comes to recruiting minority candidates. They also, we find in our conversations with them, don't consider teaching a profession. And if you combine it with the fact that many of these kids are first-generation college graduates, they're under a lot of pressure from their families or from social expectations to join a profession. And teaching is just often one concentric circle outside of the definition of profession. So it's not an acceptable career goal for them. And then also we find with our first generation students, there's a lot of overlap between the minority students and first gen. They need tutoring, they need cost of living support, that's a real barrier to entry, and they need professional dispositions support. So we have started to put in place, much like what Dana has talked about, scaffolding to help with tutoring and dispositions work with all of our candidates. And we're seeking funding for cost of living. I'm gonna highlight some of our students who are just proud parents. That's Dylan up in the top. He graduated last year and he's teaching in Albany City schools. And Dylan's teaching social studies and Mayor's teaching business at Ravenna schools just outside of the Capital District of New York. Okay, next slide. So we sat down and said, how do we attack this? How do we attack this problem of having graduating classes coming out of our MAT programs that are virtually white? And when you think back to the pie chart from Schenectady, we need to fix that. So we decided there were really three pieces to this pie in terms of a solution that we were going to work towards. One is recruitment, one is grants, and one's partnerships. And there is overlap between these three, but for this presentation, I've tried to divide things out into those three segments so that we can talk about them more clearly. Okay, next. So first, grants. New York State has a My Brother's Keeper Teacher Opportunity Corps grant. It's specifically designed for minority candidates who commit to teaching in high need districts in New York State. It's a great grant. It's fairly easy to get. The problem with it is it's only $5,400. The person has to be going full time. And often we find that first generation graduate students do much better on a little bit lighter schedule. So again, there's our supports. And we're a private institution, so our tuition is $38,000 for the program. So $5,400 is nice, but it doesn't put much of a dent in it. So when we wrote this grant, we asked Clarkson to commit to matching New York State's contribution by 150%. And they agreed to, based on our goals, to increase minority candidates in the program. So we're very proud that Clarkson has made that commitment, which brings the money up to over $20,000 for the students. So now we're taking a chunk out of the tuition. Likewise, another New York State grant is the Clinically Rich Intensive Teacher Institute grant. We've done something similar with that. That grant is specifically for TESOL teachers. And then we also have a NOICE grant, which some of you might be familiar with. And that NOICE grant does provide $20,000 for tuition for candidates who, again, are agreeing to go into high need schools. And then we have a local foundation, the Schenectady Foundation, which we've had a partnership with for years. They sponsor a lot of smaller initiatives, but one of the things that they do for us each year is they sponsor 2 MAT candidates. In their graduate work, they provide them with a scholarship of $7,500, and Clarkson matches with $7,500. So again, taking a chunk out of that tuition cost. And these candidates do their residencies in Schenectady City schools, and then are promised an interview in the school. So they get an interview whether or not there's even a job opening, and if there's a job opening, hopefully they get the job. And this program has been going, for more than 10 years now. So we have several alum who teach, well, we have a couple dozen alum who teach in Schenectady City schools, but at this point we have several alum who are Schenectady Foundation awardees who also teach in the schools. And then right now we're working on 2 new initiatives, the Black Educators Initiative, which is a grant that's sponsored through the National Center for Teacher Residencies. It's an organization that has posted an RFP to specifically fund Black residents. So we're working on that. Hopefully we'll hear in July. And then another initiative is something that I could probably talk for a half hour about, so I won't, but it's called an Income Shared Agreement program. And in this program, what you ask the student to commit to is taking a portion of their tuition, and in this case with our Income Shared Agreement, $10,000, and we defer payment of that tuition until they're into their career. So it reduces their immediate tuition costs by $10,000. And then once they're in their career, each year they pay back a portion of that $10,000. And what's interesting about the way this works is with one donor contribution, a one-time contribution, you can get the wheels moving on this machine, I'll call it, this financial machine, so that as you add students and then alumni into it, the more alumni that pay back, the more money goes into the machine, so that you can then provide more students with an income shared agreement. So it's been approved by our CFO, and we're this close to getting our donor. So if we have that, we'll be able to essentially scholarship 5 students a year for $10,000 in perpetuity. And that's the beauty of this. And that this particular income shared agreement requires a one-time donation of $200,000. And if you have that one-time donation, you can scholarship people in perpetuity. It really is an incredible model. The reason it works for our field, the reason this income shared agreement works is because I think that most states are like this. We can predict with a high degree of certainty what our alumni will make and how much they can contribute back. And we can predict with a high degree of certainty, well, this year being the exception, what our employment rates are. So you need those kinds of certainties in order for this financial model to work. But if you feel like you're in that situation, income shared agreements are something that you should look into. I think they're a real opportunity for teacher ed. Okay, next slide. Recruitment. So the first thing that we did a few years ago as our program started to grow was we convinced Clarkson that our program needed a dedicated recruiter, and that while that recruiter would technically be part of the admissions and recruiting department, they really are part of our department. And fast forward 2.5 years, we have our own dedicated recruiter, and she really is part of our department. She attends our weekly department meetings. She is part of what we do. And that has improved the pipeline and the communication of recruiting students into our program. The next step that we're taking is to try to convince Clarkson that they need a dedicated diversity recruiter. We don't, as a university, have a dedicated diversity recruiter. So we've written it into our Black Educators Initiative grant and a couple of other grants. We're hoping to offset some costs to convince Clarkson to make that move. We also have a partnership with Schenectady City Schools. And you see pictured here, Patrick Jean-Pierre. He is one of our adjunct faculty, and he's the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Recruitment at Schenectady. And when he works in conjunction with our recruiter, and they often will have joint open houses at Schenectady City Schools where we attract the paras, the substitute teachers, people in the community who are interested in the field of teaching. So we'll have open houses that our recruiter and Patrick do together. Our recruiter has traveled on the road with Patrick, and Patrick also focuses on organizations in the Capital Region where recent immigrants are coming into those organizations. And he's been really successful at finding us foreign language teachers. So people from Senegal or Gabon or Haiti or you name it. He has found people who have college educations, who are recent immigrants, who are fluent in a second language, who we can then provide with maybe some of the gap information that they need. Maybe they need to pick up a couple of courses and then enroll them in the MAT. And Schenectady hires them as part of this agreement. So we've been really successful in partnering with Patrick. And he pretty much finds these people, and we use the phrase, he throws them over the fence, because we're only a couple blocks away from the school. He throws them over the fence to us, and we sit down with them and say, okay, based on your education and background, here's what you need to prepare for the MAT, and then we can enroll you in the MAT. And we work in partnership with the district to make sure these folks have the support they need. And then the last recruiting tool I'll talk about is a Grow Your Own initiative. Again, this is with Schenectady City Schools and 2 other higher ed institutions. So Schenectady City Schools has an articulation agreement with the local community college, and Schenectady kids can graduate with over a year of credits towards an associate's degree if they start early on in their high school career. And then they graduate from Schenectady move into their associate's program, and often finish in less than a year. From there, the community college has an articulation agreement with Cazenovia College, and Cazenovia has a campus on, well, it has a program on the community college campus for elementary ed. So what we've done is created essentially a loop where the students graduate from high school, finish their associates, matriculate into the Cazenovia elementary ed program, still on that community college campus. While they are enrolled in that program, Schenectady City Schools hires them as a TA, so they have an income. Once they graduate from their undergraduate program with elementary certification, they matriculate into our master's degree and get their TESOL certification. And then gradually they will step into a full-time, move from being a TA into a full-time position, either as an elementary teacher or as a TESOL teacher. And then of course, once they graduate, they will have 2 or 3 certifications and higher ed education all the way up to a master's degree, and will have never had to leave Schenectady. And this also takes the burden of cost of living off the table for most of these kids because they can live at home. So this program is in place. It's not old enough yet that we've had students complete the loop and get all the way to us. There are students working on their bachelor's degree now, so we'll get them in a couple of years. But also embedded in this program are mentoring supports. So those kids, even though they're not part of Clarkson yet, have attended sessions at Clarkson, have attended workshops, and are being mentored by all of the players involved in this Grow Your Own initiative. So it's fairly complex, but once we as a community realized we had all the pieces and could overcome some of the barriers that exist in New York State and that are probably common between state institutions and private institutions, which we needed to overcome because there are both SUNY aspects of this and independent higher ed university aspects of this. Once we overcame all of those hurdles, we were able to put a program together that actually has kids moving through the pipeline. And that's really exciting for us. Okay, next slide. Partnerships. So you can tell we're big on partnerships. So here are a few other examples of partnerships. An area independent school, Emma Willard, it's one of the oldest boarding girls schools in the country. We created a partnership with them more than 10 years ago where they will recruit 2 novice teachers a year to teach at Emma Willard for 2 years. And while they're doing that, they're getting their MAT. Emma Willard funds their MAT while they're teaching at Emma, they're doing dorm duty, and they're doing a sport or a club activity. So in the independent school world, that's called a triple threat. So our Emma fellows sign up for quite a lot of responsibility, but they graduate in 2 years with 2 years of teaching experience at one of the foremost independent schools in the country and our MAT, and they're launched on these great independent school careers. And because of this program, we now have 5 alums who teach at Emma Willard, and 3 out of the 5 are minority candidates. And we try, Emma Willard and Clarkson tries very hard to focus on minority recruitment in this fellowship program. And you see Corey there, who's one of our recent grads who now teaches math. We also have an articulation, a partnership with the International Montessori School of Beijing. Most of you know Montessori doesn't go up into the secondary levels, but this school is building a middle and high school, and we're helping them with that. And it's not technically Montessori, it's Montessori-like. They've already hired one of our grads and are interviewing a couple more. And we have partnerships with them and teacher exchanges with them to help just learn more about global education. So that's been a really fruitful partnership. We have an articulation agreement with Beijing Normal University. They send us a few students every year who have completed their bachelor's and master's in teaching Chinese as a second language. And then those candidates come to us and get their master's in teaching Chinese. So the global perspective is really well represented by those Chinese students, and also by the students, as I mentioned before, that Patrick Jean-Pierre is recruiting for us, these recent immigrants. I think that last year, 20%, it was probably higher, it was probably close to 30% of our graduating cohort were immigrants. And we were pretty proud of that. So we also just recently created a partnership with a BOCES. A BOCES is a regional, it stands for Board of Ed Cooperative Services. They're regional schools. So a regional BOCES was interested in, they noticed, let me start the sentence back, they noticed that among their component districts, they had almost 20 teaching assistants who were native Chinese speakers. And they approached these individuals and said, how many of you would be interested in becoming certified Chinese teachers? And then they reached out to us and said, can we create a pipeline for these folks? It might be 2 or 3 years long, because again, they might have some back work to do first before they enter the MAT program. But can we create a pipeline for these folks to become Chinese teachers? And we said yes immediately. Because it was an exciting idea, but also because one of the challenges with our language programs, we certify in 7 different languages, is it's often challenging for us to find residency placements for our students. So if we have a cadre of, say, 15 teachers in the Putnam BOCES area that are willing to graduate and then become mentor teachers for us, it would allow us to then recruit even more. We can only take a few students a year from Beijing Normal. If we have 15 residency placements in Putnam, we can increase our enrollment quite a bit. So that's been a really fruitful partnership. And then the Grow Your Own initiative I mentioned with Schenectady, I already talked about. So I think the lesson that we learned among all of these 3 different, the grants, the partnerships, the outreach, is we pay close attention to our community, and we always talk about where is the center of the Venn diagram? You know, where is the mutually beneficial partnership that allows community organizations or schools or our P12 partners to benefit from programs that we can grow and that they can help support and grow with us. So we've gotten good at paying attention to our neighbors and asking what their needs are and seeing if their needs can help us solve a problem too. I think that's it.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, both Dana and Catherine. Again, 2 different institutions, 2 different ways of approaching it. A lot of information there that they've shared, and sincerely appreciate that. But this is an opportunity for you as listeners on the webinar, if you would like to ask them questions. So what I would request is that you drop the questions into the chat box. Christine DeGregory is with us, and she'll be helping to coordinate a little bit with any of the questions. When you put the question in the chat box, if you could also perhaps direct it to the person to whom you would like to hear a response, either Dana or Catherine, and that might help us a little bit also. So I'll let you drop your questions in there. Let's see what happens. So this is where you have to be really careful with all the silence that's on the call right at the moment. I could always tell you some jokes, or, you know, I could give you a little insight into what my grandson Logan said to me the other day, but just checking to see where we're going with our chat and if there are any questions that you'd like to share with us. Christine, do you see any questions coming up?
Not yet. I am sure people are taking the time to make sure their spelling is correct.
That's great.
I am with you though. Wait time in Zoom is a tough one.
Yeah. It is. Wait time in Zoom is very tough. Exactly. Yes. Yes. And I'm not in a position, because I'm sharing the screen. I can't see faces even. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know, you know, if people are, you know, making faces at me. I don't know if they, all right. Well, we have a comment. Okay, good. All right. Susan's reached out to us. Okay. So, Susan, to everyone, this really is to both of you, Dana, and to Catherine. Do you reach out to teachers of color and ask them to come in as guest speakers? And are you concerned about tokenism? So, Dana, I'll ask you if you would like to address that.
You know, that's always a bit of a concern, but the teachers that we approached first 3 of them had just finished our master's for the master reading teacher credential. All of those also were undergrads with us before they were practicing teachers for a time. And we had trust, and we were able to say, this feels weird. And still, here's what you know. You were a student at this university, and you know that we are lacking faculty of color. And would you be willing? And so, you know, partnerships is another way to think. Relationships, we try to work with relationships. And when those relationships, like the student who was honest with us, you can have the forthright conversation about, we do not want this to be tokenism. And still, we believe that the voice of the Latina, the Hispanic, the Black, the Asian educator is not being heard here because we're all white, and you know that to be true. And would you be willing to come and be part of that voice? I tend to just say what I'm thinking and name it and not be afraid to have the hard conversation.
Thank you. Catherine, did you want to address that a little bit also?
Yeah, I think that typically when we invite alumni in, I was trying to think about the occasions when we do it by panels. So, and the place in the program where we hit diversity, inclusion, and equity the hardest is in a class. And I actually don't think we bring any guest speakers in. So we are in the process of forming an alumni affinity group for our Black alumni specifically. And this is probably something that I should bring up with them, but it's not something that we have really, really had to grapple with yet.
Okay. Dana, this next question is directed to you. Could you explain a bit more about your junior level systems courses?
There are a couple of courses where that's focused really for everybody. One is our special ed survey course that all of our students have to take, and the other is our course for teaching English language learners. And you know, so those are very natural places to look at how systems create inequities. When you're looking in the special ed course, we look at under and over representation. We look at the data that shows how, you know, our students of color don't show up in gifted programs as much as our white kids. And then when they go through the ESL course, again, it's a perfect place to look at what systems exist broadly, culturally, but what systems also exist within schools that do not provide structures that provide real equity. And, you know, our students, the thought about equity is for a lot of them a new conversation. We do have students across all kinds of economic levels, but because we're a private institution, most of our students are students financially advantaged. And so we're having to deconstruct a bit their notions of that I earned this, and that if you work hard, you can get there, and have to challenge their way of seeing the world, that not everybody starts on the same playing field. They were born on third base and they thought they got a home run, right? And so that takes some trust first, which is why we begin in the sophomore year with looking at identity, building trust, because then we're going to push them hard to start looking at the structural sorts of issues that most of our students benefited from.
Great, thank you. So I think this is for both of you, and Catherine, I'd ask if you would start response to this question. Are there specific points you hope they will reinforce regarding CRT that possibly your traditional faculty don't know?
What's CRT?
The
Responsive teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Culturally responsive teaching.
Oh, okay.
Yes, culturally responsive teaching. Mm-hmm.
Specific points you hope they will reinforce.
So this is going back to the guest speakers and bringing people in. I'm just wondering if you're actually hoping, is there something you want them to really hit on that perhaps we as traditional faculty don't even know we're not covering?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they went through the ones that we have worked with, the three teachers that we've worked with primarily in these forums, like I said, went through our masters. And as with any good grad program, you learn as much from your students when you're having some of these hard conversations, when you bring them to the table and we all read good stuff. And they bring their stories to the table. Then we all learn. And so what we knew bringing them in is that they had some things to say, and that they would also challenge us with seeing things through the teacher's lens. It's I think really powerful that they're practicing teachers, and can speak to being, well, one of them, the only Black faculty member on the campus. And so the principal brings her all the Black kids when they have problems. You know, it's like, you're Black, so you take care of these kids. And so they can have those kinds of honest, open conversations. And so, yeah, as we're listening, we're going, oh, wow, okay, that's important. And they are entering a context where their kids look like them, but their colleagues don't. Neither do their administrators. Mm-hmm. And that presents some interesting questions. So both our students of color and our white students and our faculty get to step into their story a little bit. And so, yeah, there are things that they reinforce, and then there are new questions they raise for us every time.
Yeah, I think that, again, we're not bringing in a lot of guest speakers. We hit this topic hardest in a course we call Modern Teacher, and that course is co-taught by Patrick Jean-Pierre, our colleague from the Schenectady City Schools. So we've worked pretty hard on that curriculum, and I really liked Dana's expression, not a safe space, but a brave place. And I think Patrick really leads the kids there. That class is on Thursday nights. It's not unusual on Fridays for students to walk into my office either really excited or very upset by something that happened the night before in that class. And we've learned to gauge success with the number of students that we've shaken up in that class. So and then we also have another course called Educating All Students, where we're very intentionally moving the students through these ideas. So I do think that with the revision of the curriculum that happened 2 years ago, and we're actually looking at revising it again, it opened our faculty's eyes to our need to attend to these issues a lot more deeply in all of our classes. We're small, we only have 5 full-time faculty. And so as Dana said, we can all get in a room and sort through this, but we don't typically have a lot of guest speakers coming in.
Okay. So next is a statement from Mark. Thank you very much, Mark, Damon College, you know, that you agree with the Grow Your Own program, that you're currently using it at Damon College. And then what we have at the moment for this last question, Kimberly, jump in if I'm not explaining it correctly, but I'll present the question. Do you mean that you all look at systematic and institutional racism and bias?
Oh, you know what? They answered that. They answered that because that went along with my initial question about explain more about the systems course.
Yes.
And then I followed up, but Susan and Mark got in there ahead of me. Just asking a clarifying question, is that what you mean? And then they explained that. So thank you.
Okay, great. Right. That's what I thought. That's why I asked you to jump in, Kimberly. So I just want to make certain that I was clear with your question. Any other questions? This is where we are at this moment. I think this has been a terrific discussion. So I'll give you just a second if there are any other questions that have bubbled up based on the conversations that you've heard.
Well, and I love that the two programs are very different. You know, we start when they're, 17, 18, and then looking at a program that's fully grad. And so the questions are the same. The way you address that is in some ways developmental. As well.
And one of the challenges for us is for many of our students, we only have them for 12 months.
Wow.
So the dispositions becomes very important. and the degree to which we can move that needle with candidates in 12 months about their global thinking, it's a real challenge. So we're very intentional with every moment we have with our students.
And our first, I'm my head is spinning with some of the things you've said about recruitment, even looking at through a grad lens. Our start with was how do we keep and support and retain and help move to completion and certification the students that we have first. That was kind of our, wow, we've got some students here. How are we supporting them? Because they aren't completing, particularly our Black students. But that's stats across the country. Is undergrad, the Black population has the lowest completion rate. But so that was where we started. And now we're looking at the conversation of how do we now recruit? I think if we have a compelling story to tell about our inclusive practices, about the supports we offer, that will assist in recruiting. But that's not where we started. We started with, we've got these kids and we're not serving them well, and we're not giving them a voice, and we're not challenging their peers to hear their voices. And so so that's where we started.
Well, it's exciting, and just hearing that discussion between the two of you reminds me again that, you know, the intent of these brown bag quarterlies is so that we can bring the voices in, so that we can you know, really try to break down some of those silos, assist each other, you know, and talk about what's going on, and thinking about exactly, you know, what are some opportunities, what are some other options, what are some ways to be thinking about different ways to approach this. So I sincerely appreciate both of you joining us today and presenting what you're doing. Please, our attendees and all of you, please stay tuned for what we have coming up next for the Brown Bag Quarterly Series, our BBQ. Hope to see you in September. We will be putting out ideas about the topics and the specific dates very soon. Christine's pretty good about doing that. She keeps us all up to date. Continuing the conversation with AAQEP and our AAQEP members, keep in mind that we do have our virtual workshops. All the workshops that were face-to-face, we have and are working on developing those to be virtual. We do have a collaborative conversation that was started with by a member that we are supporting with some different topics. We have open forums that we're covering, for example, the one about disrupting with the clinical experience that we had a couple weeks ago. And then the consulting is always continues to be available. And I want to thank you very much. I'll check and make certain that we didn't have any other questions that came in before I completely close, but it looks like we've got a lot of thank yous, and I have to absolutely add our thank you from AAQEP. Catherine, Dana, we sincerely appreciate your sharing all of your information and what you are doing at your institution with your programs, helping us so that we can definitely look at the diversity of our workforce and consider what we're doing, not just recruiting, but also supporting the diverse populations in the programs and into the field. So having said that, I want to thank all of you who've attended today's webinar. Just a reminder that it will be posted. It has been recorded. It will be posted on our website. So check aqep.org for updates and any other opportunities. If you have some questions or ideas, send it to aqep@aqep.org. And want to, again, appreciate, we are closing out with 1 minute today, but I think that we've all going to be very appreciative of what we've heard and the time that we've taken. So again, thank you, Dana. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you to all of our attendees. So hope to see you again soon online.